Good morning. Today is the 30th day of the first Adar, which is a very rare day. We only have it 7 times in 19 years. And it's a special day. It's actually related to what we talked about on Friday. The 5 aspects of doubt that we talked about were in what we call the unknowable head, the Reisha de lo Ityada. And the common abbreviation for that in the books is Radla. Reish Dalid Lamed Aleph, and Mazal Tov to Erica, and these 4 letters, Reish Dalid Lamed Aleph, they spell Lamed Adar, meaning the 30th day of Adar, and you can only have that day when there are 2 Adars, when there are 2 months of Adar. So it's a rare day in that respect. It's also the 10th of March, and we're starting a new parsha, the final parsha of the book of Exodus, Shmos. And the final parsha is Pekudei. Pekudei means the ones accounted for. It's all about accounting. It's basically a parsha, a whole reading about accounting. And we actually talked a little bit about this last week because we mentioned the fact that gold is not accounted for. We only hear how much gold there was. We're not told what it was used for. But the silver and the copper, we know what they were used for. The beginning of the parsha tells us. What we want to look at today is chapter 38, verse 20. Sorry, that wasn't the correct. Chapter 38, verse 25. And there were some people who asked what Chumash, what version of the Pentateuch I'm using. So I usually use this one. You can see it here, backwards obviously. It's the Kahot version. I'll write it out. And I'll also hopefully write it out in the YouTube description. It's the Kahot Chumash. It's called just Chumash. They don't have another name for it. This is what it looks like on the side. It's a 5-volume set. And it was written done by a friend of mine, Rabbi Moshe Vishnevsky, and he did a phenomenal job on the translation and in putting most of the Rashi straight into the translation with the commentary also from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, all included in one thing. So that's what I usually use. But there can be variations, that the text of the Hebrew is never different, but the translations can be varied. So we're looking at verse 25 in chapter 38. The silver from those of the community who had been counted came to 100 talents. Okay, so what is 100 talents? It's a measure, it's a kikar. And exactly how much it is, I don't see here the exact definition, but so it's 3,000 shekels per talent. So a shekel, we said, is 20 gerah, and a gerah is about a gram. So what we have is that 20 times 20 grams in a shekel, and there were 3,000 shekels in a talent. So you might say it's about 60,000 grams, or 600 or 60 kilograms. 60,000 would be 60 kilograms per talent. And then 60 times 100, I get about 6,000 kilograms. They put it here as much less, about 3/4 of that. That's 4,828 kilograms. I guess he's using a different measure for Geirah. I'm not sure why it came out differently. In any case, it doesn't matter so much, but let's read the end of the verse. Came to 100 talents of silver that was donated, and it was donated a half shekel per person. So it was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels. Obviously, you need 3,000 shekels to a talent, so it didn't make up the 3,001st talent. There was only 3,000 of them, and the rest was 1,775 out of 3,000 of a talent, or 1,775 shekels. This number, 1,775, on the face of it, is just an accounting. It's not an error. It's just what was left over. And then there's the question of what was done with this number over the generations. So we're getting into a very interesting topic. It's interesting to everyone who has, especially a Christian background, but not necessarily. This whole idea of predicting when the redemption is going to come, when the Mashiach is going to come. Now, on the face of it, the Talmud says, don't do this. The spirit should be smothered out of a person who tries to calculate the time of the redemption. And why is that? Because this always leads to heartache in some way. However, even or despite this injunction by the Talmud, in almost every single generation we've seen even the great giants of Torah try to calculate when the redemption will be. The question is, why do they do this? So, the first thing to know is that there's a verse in Isaiah 60, I believe it is verse 22. And there Isaiah says, and let me read you this verse, he says, the smallest shall become a clan, the least a mighty nation. He's talking about the redemption. I, God, will speed it in due time. In Hebrew, be'ita achishena. Very important phrase. And what it's saying, I will speed it in due time, is a contradiction. On the face of it, it's a contradiction. That's the way the Talmud understood it. Either you speed it, or it's in due time. Of course, the plain meaning is that when the due time comes, God will make it progress quickly. But on the face of it, this verse contains a paradox. And it's saying there's due time for the redemption. If there's a calculated, predetermined moment at which the redemption will start, when the Messiah will come. And on the other hand, there's a time that is not predetermined. It will be hastily. God will speed it up. What does it mean, speed it up? In the same way that we know that that's what happened, at least that's how the sages interpret it. It's very hard to interpret it differently. And God said that the Jewish people, the Israelites, would be outside of the land of Israel for 400 years. That's what he told Abraham at the covenant between the shards. And yet, in practice, they were there much less. They were there for only 210 years. And then even at the Exodus, we hear a verse that says they were there for 430 years, not just 400. So there's contradictions. You have to, again, one way of solving these contradictions, say that these are from different sources, but we don't hold by that. We hold that this is all the words of God. So how do you find a way in between these two different sources? The answer that the sages give is that indeed they were supposed to be there 400 years, but God calculated the kates. Kates means the end or the date on which something is supposed to happen. So he calculated it. What does it mean he calculated? He didn't use the original due date. He changed it, meaning he hastened it. Even though it was supposed to be 400 years, in practice there were only 210 years. So he took off 190 years. And they even find various allusions to this in the text. For instance, when God says to Jacob, go down, he says, redu, go down. Redu, in Gematria, the value of this word redu, Reish Dalet Vav, is 210. So from them they learned that they were meant to be there only 210 years, not 400. Another thing is that the word kates itself, the end, the date, the due date, this word kates, kuf tzadik, is equal to 190. So when they say he calculated the kates, what they're saying is he took off a kates, he took off 190 years. In any case, we see that even though there might be a due date, the due date is like the last possible date. And when the due date comes, it's not, on the face of it, related to our actions. Because the due date has come, it's come. It doesn't matter whether we're ready or not ready, now it's going to happen. But hastily means that based on our actions, it may come quicker, in a shorter time. So this number, 1,775, going back to our verse 38, 25, I believe it was 28, wherever we were, that verse is hinting to some kates, it's hinting to some kind of final date. And the way that this was actually calculated, and we mentioned that even the great sages of the Jewish people over the generations have calculated, or tried to calculate, the date of the redemption. So Maimonides, for instance, did this, and you wouldn't expect this from someone who was an absolute rationalist, but he did. And the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, Chassidut, he also calculated. He came out with a number that's 603, which means 1843, the 603rd year of the 6th millennium. But he learned this from this verse with the 1775. And what he did there was very interesting. He said, really the temple was destroyed 172 years before the 5th millennium, meaning it was destroyed in the year from the creation of 4,000, see if I can get it right, 827. Did I do that right? 28, sorry. 4,828 from the creation. So we had another 172 years until the end of the 4th millennium. So I said that incorrectly. 3,828. And that's 172 years before the end of the 4th millennium. Then, when you add 172 and you add 1,775 to that, and he also does a little bit of a different calculation there, it comes out either to 5,608, or he, for some reason, right there for 5,603. It's a little complex why he did that. He took off 5 years for something. I'm not exactly sure why. And he comes up with this number. This is the due date. Now, 5,603, 1843 came and passed, and supposedly there was no redemption. So the sons of the third Rebbe, they said that the redemption that came in that year was that a certain body of teachings of the Alter Rebbe was printed, and that was a type of redemption. But not the redemption we're looking for, something much less than that. So there was actually a Sikh tradition in Chabad that he once even said that 1,775 means 1,775 years from the end of the 4th millennium, meaning the year 5775. That was 9 years ago, 5,775. That was the year 2015. And that was supposed to be a kates. It was supposed to be a due date. But what are due dates about? So due dates are not, as we said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the redemption will come. These things were said by these sages in order to give people hope. They were meant to give them a feeling that it's up to us, that we can do something. We should get prepared. We should get ready for it. And if we get ready for it, it will come even more speedily. That was the idea. Be'ita achishena. In its due date, I will hasten it. So if you know the due date and you do things to make it happen quicker, it will happen quicker. So this is a state of mind that we need to be in. That whatever the due date is, if you find the verse and you can figure out from that it's this year, 5,784, that's even better. Or do 5,785. As long as the purpose is to give hope and to have people connect more strongly with this idea of the redemption. To know that we are not alone, we're not to despair, to be in joy, to know that things are going to change very soon. That has to be part of the psychology of a person who follows Torah. The psychology always has to be that I should be in joy all the time. And if for that I need to understand that the redemption is very close, I need to have that due date in my mind. I have to know that due date is a potential that we can work on and we can make it happen even more quickly. So with this we'll end today, and Hope to see you tomorrow.